Hello, thank you for joining us on the news. I'm Ruth Aguele. My sign language interpreter is Shagun Ajayi. Let's begin with the headlines. Federal government to relaunch new model for national homegrown school feeding program. Delta State Governor and other PDP stakeholders defect to ruling All Progressives Congress. Plus, body of Pope Francis moves to St. Peter's Basilica to lie in state for Catholic faithful to pay their last respect. President Bola Tinubu has just had a security meeting with heads of intelligence agencies. National Security Advisor Nuhu Rabadu, Director General, Department of State Services Adeola Ajayi, his counterpart in the National Intelligence Agency, Mohammed, Chief of Defense Intelligence, Major General Emmanuel Ondiande, were in the State House for the meeting. State House correspondent Musbahu Wahab reports that the meeting reviewed security situation following some disturbances in parts of the country. We'll bring you details in subsequent or in the course of the bulletin. We turn to other issues. Commercial flight activities have commenced at the Bola Ahmed Tinubu International Airport, Minna. Minister of Information and National Orientation was among dignitaries at the inaugural flight that landed at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, from Minna. Let's hear from Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara. All right, we'll bring you the report in the course of the bulletin. The federal government is set to relaunch a new model for the national homegrown school feeding program following the ongoing reform being coordinated by the National Social Investment Program Agency. Now, the program coordinators under the supervision of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction engaged stakeholders in Abuja in preparation for the takeoff. All right, we also don't have that ready, but we'll definitely bring it to you in the course of the bulletin. Governor of Katsina State, Diko Umaru Rada, has announced allocation of 30% of the state's annual budget to building climate-resilient infrastructure. This was during the launch of Katsina State Green Growth Agenda in Abuja, dedicated to combat the devastating effect of climate change in Katsina State. Let's hear from Ekene Ndulwe.
Katsina State, situated in Nigeria's climate-vulnerable northwest region, is faced with threats from desertification, erratic rainfall, and land degradation. The governor is convinced that these climate challenges can be turned to opportunities and has brought together stakeholders in this hall to discuss climate action plans to develop his state. The Katsina State Green Growth Agenda details the governor's plans to introduce climate-smart agriculture and harness renewable energy to become Nigeria's solar powerhouse.
4,500 farmers will be trained in sustainable practices. By 2027, we aim to establish 2,000 climate resilience farming cooperatives in the state. We plan to electrify 500 rural communities with solar mini-grids by 2030, inshallah.
The event was an invitation to investors to partner with the state in achieving this agenda, a request they consider timely.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite all partners, investors and stakeholders present here to see this summit as not as a one-off event, but as beginning of a domestic journey, a journey that positions Katsina State as a beacon of sustainability in Nigeria and a model of how subnational leadership can drive global change.
The deliberateness of identifying and promoting those opportunities is a key success point. And in that wise, one must commend the innovativeness and the step taken by Katsina State government.
Katsina State government is also driving its climate awareness campaign to the younger generations and has rewarded 4 winners of the Katsina State Salah Climate Change School Competition with cash prizes of 500,000 naira each. In Abuja, Ekene Ndulue, NTAi News.
All right, let's take you back to the report we called on commercial flight activities that has commenced at the Bola Ahmed Tinubu International Airport in Minna. Let's see how the dignitaries who took the inaugural flight fared. Salihu Gwanera will tell us about that.
After more than 4 decades of operations, the wait is now over as prospective commercial air travelers can now access the sky to any part of the world. Niger State government, through its new Niger aviation policy, is working to enhance the aviation ecosystem and harness the state's natural endowment.
Right now, we are building the largest greenhouses around the airport city in Africa. It means you can have fresh flowers delivered across Africa, fresh agro-processed materials everywhere in the world. This is one of the attractions.
We have to appreciate our president, like my governor has said. This is a dream come true. The governor has indeed made this to happen. He's so passionate about opening up Niger State, about opening it up for agriculture, for opening it up for commerce, for industry, for prosperity, I should say. And then one very key issue we need to talk about is the kind of collaboration that Mr. President is always talking about between the federal government and the subnationals. This is one great example that the Niger State has shown, that the state can indeed come together with the federal government to collaborate in order to bring prosperity to Nigeria.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu International Airport has a agro-processing free trade area. And the essence is to encourage processing of agricultural produce, food for that matter, so that with an aviation facility like the airport, a lot of things can be taken out of. So Niger State is actually the state where agriculture is.
And the mission we have started today, Lagos to Minna, Minna to Abuja, and you saw the number of people that came off the plane. It has sustained itself.
For now, these flights will connect Minna to Abuja and Lagos, Nigeria's political and commercial capitals, 3 times a week. Meanwhile, Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, has taken over the leadership of Niger State Development Forum, a non-governmental and non-partisan group that is championing an advisory role to Niger State government in order to fast-track development.
No meaningful development can take place in the absence of peace and security, and conversely, the dividends of development often serve as a catalyst for peace and stability. This is a reality that is well understood by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whose administration is investing heavily in these key sectors as part of a holistic strategy to transform our dear nation.
I want to share with the chairman of this forum that the Niger State government has already started work in progress to develop a 50-year long-term plan, 30-year mid-term plan, and a 10-year short-term plan.
Niger State Governor Mohammed Umar Bago inaugurated the forum and assured to sustain efforts towards building a new Niger State. In Abuja, Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara, NTAi News.
In other news, the International Monetary Fund says disruptions to global supply chains, cost uncertainty around tariff hikes and trade tensions could worsen an already complex economic landscape. Kulo Mohammed reports.
Oliver Goring Charles, chief economist of the International Monetary Fund (IMF), made a remark as the IMF downgrades global economic growth projections in the latest economic outlook report released. The IMF now focuses global growth at 2.8%, a sharp 0.5% points reduction from its January estimate, with a further slowdown to 3% projected for 2026.
As you have this uncertainty about tariffs and trade relations, some of these frictions could get amplified along the supply chains. You don't know if your suppliers are going to be there. You don't know if your customers are going to be there. The supply chain may have to be reoriented. That injects another layer of uncertainty to a situation that's already quite complex.
This downward revision follows the United States announcement of sweeping reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, which has driven global tariff rates to their highest levels in a century, creating what a report describes as a major negative shock to global economic growth. In other news, smuggling suspects in Kenya will be sentenced on May 7th. A magistrate presiding over the case of 4 suspects charged with smuggling garden ants has set their sentencing during a hearing in Nairobi on Wednesday. Magistrate Njeri Thoko made the ruling after receiving the victim's impact report from the Kenya Wildlife Services officials. Kolo Muhammad, NTAi News.
A high-level meeting convened by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres earlier today saw representative groups of world leaders engaged in crucial climate talks. Charles Alpha reported that the central agenda was how to significantly combat the climate crisis with a firm focus on achieving a 50% emission reduction by 2030 and the ambitious 1.5 degrees Celsius target not later than 2050.
After the 29th Conference of Parties in Abuja, Brazil was selected as the host country of the 30th edition of the UN conference. And this explains why the crucial closed-door virtual session that was attended by a cross-section of world leaders, including from some of the world's largest economies and most climate-vulnerable countries, particularly Africa and the Caribbean community. The African Union, ASEAN, and the Alliance of Small Island States and CARICOM were also part of the 17 participants. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres briefed the media at the end of the closed-door meeting, where he said the world cannot allow climate commitments be blown off course and that leaders must keep building momentum for action at COP30 in Brazil, with the crisis deepening poverty, displacing communities and fueling conflict and instability. The world, he said, is moving forward at full speed. No group or government, he said, can stop the clean energy revolution, saying renewables are the economic opportunity of the century.
These new climate plans offer a unique opportunity to lay out a bold vision for a just green transition over the next decades. They should align with 1.5 degrees and set emissions reduction targets that cover all greenhouse gases and the whole economy, as several today mentioned clearly. Most importantly, they should help speed up a just transition away from fossil fuels to renewables.
Renewables, Antonio Guterres said, offer the surest route to energy sovereignty and security. He urged leaders to take action on 2 fronts. First, to step up efforts to submit the strongest possible national climate plans well ahead of COP30, while leaders must do all they can to scale up support for developing countries, as those least responsible for climate change are suffering from its worst effects. The UN Secretary-General said at COP30, leaders must deliver a credible roadmap to mobilize $1.3 trillion a year for developing countries by 2035, while developed countries must honor their promise to double adaptation finance to at least $40 billion a year by this year. Charles Alpha, NTAi News.
The acting WHO Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, has appealed for bold actions to ensure no child is left behind as the 2025 vaccination week begins across the continent. The week, observed annually from April 24 to 30, highlights both the monumental gains of vaccines and the urgent gaps that persist. Dr. Ihekweazu emphasized that while immunization has saved over 150 million lives in the last 5 decades, Africa still faces a critical challenge as millions of children remain unprotected from deadly but preventable diseases. Record shows that in 2023 alone, 6.7 million African children received no vaccines at all, noting that these zero-dose children are a glaring reminder that equitable access to vaccines is still out of reach for too many. This year's theme underscores a renewed push to restore and expand routine immunization services disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In other news, the body of Pope Francis was moved to St. Peter's Basilica earlier this Wednesday to lie in state for Catholic faithful to pay their last respects to the Argentine pontiff, remembered for his humble lifestyle, concern for the poor, and incessant prayers for peace. Kolo Mohammed has details.
Pallbearers carried the simple wooden coffin on their shoulders through the Vatican's Archway Gate, out into St. Peter's Square and into the Basilica, with a procession of cardinals in scarlet cassocks and Swiss guards in their golden and blue uniforms slowly behind it. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who is running the Vatican temporarily until a new pope is elected, led the procession with clouds of incense preceding him as the church choir began chanting the litany of saints' hymn. Heads of state are expected for Francis' funeral Saturday in St. Peter's Square, but the 3 days of public viewing are largely for ordinary Catholics to grieve the 88-year-old Pope who died Monday after the Vatican said he had a stroke and a heart failure. Francis first lay in state in the Santa Marta Domus in a private viewing for Vatican residents and the papal household. His body was transferred from his residence at Casa Santa Marta, where he died. The coffin will be kept open until midnight on Wednesday and Thursday to allow the faithful to mourn. The public mourning period will end on Friday at 7 p.m. Thousands of mourners and worshippers flocked to St. Peter's Square in the Vatican on Wednesday to witness the ceremonial transfer of Pope, as dozens of cardinals and other members of the clergy led the procession. The public will be able to pay their respects from Wednesday until Friday, with the funeral taking place on Saturday. Pope Francis passed away on Monday at the age of 88, with Vatican officials later confirming he had died from a stroke and heart failure. His death also follows a long-running battle with pneumonia and hospitalization earlier this year. The Argentine pontiff, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires in 1936, was the first Latin American and first Jesuit pope. Kolo Mohammed, NTAi News.
All right, let's take a break. We're back shortly. Thank you for staying with us. And we take you back to the report we called earlier on federal government's plan to relaunch a new model for the National Homegrown School Feeding Program following the reform that is being coordinated by the National Social Investment Program Agency. Let's see that.
I ate rice, beans, still I'm talking with banana.
1 meal a day, and this brought smiles to millions of pupils across primary schools. Open the gates for more enrollment into schools, building a system of promoting productive learning. Following the impact of the National Homegrown School Feeding Program, the federal government is set to relaunch a comprehensive and new model targeting 11 million pupils across the country.
You now look at where you can key in and see what you can do in the area of either monitoring and evaluation, in the area of capacity building.
These engagement with stakeholders and development partners is to seek their support towards achieving the set goal by keying into the mechanisms put in place and adopting new strategies towards enhancing the school feeding program.
Must be sourced from a smallholder farmer that is going to be registered.
Part of the new strategies adopted is on improving the nutritional value of the meal, promote value chain that benefits both local farmers and cooks to promote empowerment among rural dwellers.
Mr. President is passionate about the position of Nigeria in terms of out-of-school children. And one of that strategies to reduce the number of out-of-school children is strong and effective school feeding programs, and we want to make it in such a way that it's not only going to be business of National Homegrown School Feeding program in NSPA, but also engaging private organizations, non-governmental organizations, civil society groups.
Also, we are going to build a digital platform that anybody, the public space, can go into it and see on a daily basis how many children are being fed.
And so for us, it's providing our technical expertise in terms of ensuring sustainability for food supply for this segment of the population.
As key players continue to engage before the official launch, they are hopeful the new initiative will build confidence and trust that will promote transparency, accountability, and effective coordination of the school feeding program across the country. And talking politics, Delta State Governor Sharif Oborewori and other party members moved from People's Democratic Party, stakeholders in the state we here have defected to the ruling All Progressives Congress. Now, this was disclosed by the State Commissioner for Works, Rural Roads and Public Information, Charles Aniagu, after a closed-door meeting of stakeholders in the Government House in Asaba. Susan Esu reports.
The Government House was flooded with past and present National Assembly members, House of Assembly, local government chairmen, and other stakeholders of the PDP in Delta State for a closed-door meeting which lasted for close to 6 hours. Press men waited anxiously to be briefed. Then came the much-anticipated news that Governor Sharif Oborewori has shifted grounds politically after months of consultations.
We needed to take a decision that will further help to cement the development in our state, to build the bond of love that have existed in our state, to further advance the cause of security and welfare of our people, and to a very large extent, ensure that development in Delta, because every politics is local, is not truncated. And in taking that decision, we came to the inevitable conclusion that moving out of the PDP is very, very necessary for us to be able to collaborate with our kith and kin and build that state that every Delta will be proud of.
Pioneer member of the PDP in the state, Senator James Manager, also added that the move is as a result of the internal wranglings in the People's Democratic Party. As at the time of filing this report, the PDP flag in Government House was still flying. Official declaration to this effect is scheduled for Monday, April 28, 2025. From Government House, Asaba. Susan Esu, NTAi News.
The Nigerian Television Authority will strengthen existing synergy through adequate projection of the Nigerian Air Force activities. This was disclosed when the Executive Director News, Ayo Adewuyi, hosted the Director of Public Relations and Information, Nigerian Air Force, at the NTAi headquarters in Abuja. Olajide Bello reports.
The Nigerian Air Force had long soared above the headlines and visible in the skies, while their mission grew in scale and significance from counter-terrorism to disaster relief and public awareness. The force needed a strong voice on the ground to match its strength in the air. Hence, this visit by the Director of Public Relations and Information to cement the already existing relationship between the Nigerian Air Force and the Nigerian Television Authority.
The battle space has changed. It's much more than just bombs and bullets. Now we're talking about winning hearts and minds, about building trust. And this is in line with the 61st anniversary theme that the Nigerian Force is projecting, which is about optimizing civil-military relations.
The Nigerian Television Authority, which exudes professionalism and accuracy, as a national broadcaster, reiterates its commitment to world peace and national development in line with its vision and mission.
We understand the importance of the armed forces and the need for us to synergize in achieving the security that we all desire in Nigeria. That is why, like I said, we have to attach correspondence each of the arms of the armed forces because of the importance. So I hope we will continue the relationship and strengthen
The NTAi says it will continue to be at the front line of objectivity, projecting the activities of the armed forces as they continue to protect Nigeria's territorial integrity. Olajide Bello, NTA News.
And that's where we end the news. Thank you for being part of it. I'm Ruth Aguele. My sign language interpreter is Shagun Ajayi. Bye.